Welcome to the program, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
So rise to power, you don't say.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I mean, I suppose we could start with the president, who was one of the chief purveyors, it seems to me, of the birther conspiracy about Barack Obama. But
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think people are probably familiar with his trajectory. But let's talk about. I mean, and I want to cover. I mean, obviously, we've talked on this program about Pizzagate, about Seth Rich, and certainly in terms of what you call Russiagate. But let's start with just the overall perspective on conspiracies. I mean, this isn't the conspiracy theories. I mean, the existence of conspiracy theories, you write, is nothing new. What makes it different now?
So I think pointing out that Donald Trump's sort of rise to actual political prominence started with birtherism is important because we saw the ways that he realized that using conspiracy theories was a way to create a base to appeal to the right wing. It was a way for him to, create some measure of attention for himself. So what we've seen over the last few years is this resurgence of the idea that promoting conspiracy theories can sort of tie all these pretty strange, disparate groups together and can give them some actual political influence in the mainstream.
So, I mean, and I guess it's a good time to address like to what extent it's relevant, the propagators or the amplifiers of these conspiracy theories actually believe in them.
Right. Yeah, that comes up a lot, when I talk to people about folks like Alex Jones, and I would argue that it doesn't really matter. Or this comes up a lot with Donald Trump specifically, is does he really believe this, or is he just making this claim, for attention and for political gain? And what matters is that he's making it. What matters is that he and Alex Jones and other people are trying to promote these ideas, and in some cases have spent a really, really long time doing it. Or someone like Roger Stone, who is a known sort of troll, a self-described dirty tricks artist. It's unclear what Roger Stone or Donald Trump or Alex Jones believe in their heart of hearts, but we know what they spend their time doing and trying to promote.
So, but what is different about this era in terms of the salience of this? I mean, obviously, conspiracy theories, like we say, go back a long time, and they're not, even pre-social media, right? They were there. I distinctly recall being in Gary Busey's house. It's a long story, but he had a series of VHS tapes that were all about changelings in Mount Shasta. And he claimed that if we watched these, we would have to go into the witness protection program. Now, they were still shrink wrapped. He had not opened them himself, but they, it was out there, like David Icke and that whole crew. Like what is different?
Icke, yeah.
Ike. What's the difference now?
That's more self-control than I would have given Gary Busey. Good for him.
That was the best as he got, believe me.
So I think that, yes, we know that conspiracy theories are an element, especially of American society and around the world. But we also know that conspiracy theories are strongest typically among people who are disempowered or disenfranchised, to give people a way to explain systems that are not working well, forces that they feel arrayed against them, systems in the United States, like the healthcare industry or the financial industry, that feel exploitative, or, when people's favored political party is not in power, they tend to turn to conspiracy theories. What we're seeing right now is a resurgence of conspiracy thinking used by the hands of powerful people and the powerless alike. The other thing that we're obviously seeing is the rise of social media and the ways that social media allows the spread of conspiracy theories. And also, though I think this can be over discussed to a degree, but organized troll organizations like the Internet Research Agency in Russia, or bots who can aid in the spread of conspiracy theories. So we're seeing this mixture of political influences and also sort of organic and inorganic means to spread conspiracy theories across social media. So we're seeing this really unholy confluence of stuff that is leading to the prominence and power and force of conspiracy theories in a way that we haven't seen for a really long time.
There's a lot to unpack there, but how much of the, I mean, you talk about the data shows that, people who are just broadly powerless, I guess that can mean economically powerless, politically powerless, or even, I think, sort of in some type of asymmetrical information dynamic, as it were. I mean, on some level, it strikes me as these things are like religions in some way, right? Like the people's ability to deal with modernity is just overwhelmed, and they turn to these things that are basically neatly describe what's going on.
Well, yes, I think they are a lot like religion. There are a lot of studies to show that the deeper somebody gets into conspiracy thinking, the more it sort of resembles religious faith. It actually, a lot of conspiracy theories, though, don't make things particularly neat or particularly tidy. Like the archetypal conspiracy image besides a tinfoil hat is that guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia standing in front of a bulletin board filled with photos, tied together with red string, like a very chaotic image. And so a lot of times conspiracy theories don't make a neat explanation, but what they do is they point really clearly at who to blame, who to be mad at. And that, in a way, is just as important for people as having a tidy narrative. A lot of conspiracy theories, give people purpose and meaning and direction to their lives, but they do it by creating a common enemy.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess though it occurs to me, though that is not neat with the different sort of like pictures, there is a sense that there is a neat explanation out there, right? It's just like, it's a question of, it's out there and we just got to find it. And which is also, I guess, sort of very much a religious exercise. But you also talk about, there seem to be sort of, I guess, various levels of, I mean, so much of this cuts like on multiple different planes, but there seems to be sort of like various levels of, I don't know if justification or legitimacy for pursuing conspiracy theories, but in the African American community, there's a burgeoning, or has always been a market for conspiracy theories, largely because of some almost unbelievable things that have been done to that community. Discuss that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole chapter in my book that's about conspiracy theories among Black Americans, and the reason why they are unique is because they tend to tie really directly to actual things that happen to Black people over the course of this country's history. So one thing that I talk about in a lot of detail is the idea that during Hurricane Katrina, the levees were bombed on purpose to drown Black neighborhoods on purpose and drive people out and rebuild the city, in a way more amenable to wealthy white people. And so while we don't have any evidence that happened, and there's a lot more evidence that the levees just failed, we do know that the levees just outside the city were purposely bombed during the Great Flood in the 1920s. And so the idea there is that a lot of conspiracy theories in the Black community tie indirectly to something that really did happen. Another really good example is that there's a lot of medical conspiracy theories, a lot of distrust. It's very hard to get people in the Black community to participate in medical trials for new drugs. And that is because of things like the Tuskegee experiment, where Black veterans who had syphilis were allowed to remain infected with syphilis for a very long time, long after the government knew what cured syphilis, because the government wanted to, track the progression of the disease and see how it worked. And so there are all these examples of things that, some number of Black Americans have come to believe because it is not that crazy to believe it. So this is really different than something like, say, QAnon or Pizzagate, where it has sort of less emotional and historical legitimacy and appeal.
I mean, so let's talk about like what QAnon and Pizzagate and where that where those come from, because it's I mean, these are people theoretically in power on some level, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important to sort of recognize that both Pizzagate and QAnon are fundamentally, so Pizzagate arose during the 2016 elections, and it was promoted by people who had a political reason to say that Democrats were part of a child sex trafficking ring happening in the basement of a pizza parlor. And Pizzagate was effective, and it was part of a number of strategies to, try to create distrust and division and sort of smears. And then QAnon fundamentally is a conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is secretly doing a really good job, and that his supporters, only need to wait, and soon he will, arrest all the evildoers, finally put Hillary Clinton in jail. So at their core, they are an idea that there is this sort of secret, powerful group of sexual predators, and that Donald Trump and people connected to Donald Trump are fighting them in secret.
I mean, this is where Alex Jones was too. I mean, there was a certain amount of pretzeling that had to happen. It seems to me, right? Because Alex Jones is like, the globalists will never let Donald Trump take office, which was a great thing to say when you were like everyone else, assuming that Donald Trump is not going to win.
Yeah,
when he wins,
very interesting.
When he wins, it completely undercuts the fact that there's this all-powerful cabal at the head of the world, essentially. Because how could they possibly not be able to pick the American president? What's the point of it?
Yeah, well, that's where the deep state comes in. That's where the idea of a deep state comes in. That they, tried mightily to prevent Donald Trump from winning, but when they couldn't prevent it, they then set themselves out to, work for his destruction for his whole presidency, right? But also, you'll notice that Alex Jones. So I had something in my book that we ultimately took out, but the day before Trump was inaugurated, Alex Jones recorded like a special episode of InfoWars. It sounded like he was on an airplane. And he's sort of like whispering hoarsely into his audio recorder, and he's having a meltdown. And he's saying, I know that the inauguration is not going to happen. They're not going to let it happen. It's not going to take place. I wish I could tell you what I know. And then, of course, it's just never mentioned again, that he's claiming to have evidence of this plot. But yeah, it's very confusing for people at some level who fundamentally believe themselves to be fighting this all-powerful system from the outside, and to realize, oh, wait, no, I suddenly have a much larger degree of power than I thought I did.
Do we have any sense of how I guess the followers of an Alex Jones, to what extent they would take him seriously, and to the extent that they did, like, how did they deal with that? I mean, I know, like, I've seen research on Melanistic cults where, the world's going to end on Tuesday, and then Tuesday comes and the cult leader says, why it didn't is because Bernie wore shoes, and you're not supposed to wear shoes. And so the new date is, in 3 years, that type of thing.
Right. I mean, I think that, most people I've talked to, and I've been to a lot of conspiracy related events, most people tell me specifically that they take Alex Jones with a grain of salt, and that they do their own research and that they find their own facts. But I think also it's really hard to underestimate the power of people to just sort of create new narratives as soon as the old one doesn't work out. A lot of those doomsday cults that you reference, they don't disband the day after the world doesn't end.
Right. That
some of them hang on for years, I mean, it's very hard to talk yourself out of an idea once that idea is in your head, and it's far easier to just sort of slightly rework it to make it more or less jibe with reality as you now see it.
Right, because none of this is really so much about the specific ideas themselves. It really has more to do with, I mean, are there, do we have any data, or, I mean, how do we understand who is susceptible to conspiracy theories, or is that really a wrong question?
So most people in the United States specifically believe in at least one conspiracy theory. 50% of us, 1 in 3, most of us. So the type of conspiracy theory that you believe really has a lot to do with what your political and social and economic persuasions are. And also, like, in my experience, sort of how the systems of power in this country have treated you personally. Like, you and I are people who have some degree of power, of legitimacy. I don't think either of us have been particularly badly treated by the institutions in this country, so we have less need for conspiracy thinking. And that's a useful way to think about it, is what do conspiracy theories do for people? What do they provide in the face of their particular life circumstances?
And in the case of like, sort of white supremacists, they are also developing theories to explain away like why they're not actually supreme.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, this is where the idea of a deep state or a global cabal comes in, right? This idea that like they would be supreme, genetically they're supreme, but because of these secret rulers of the world, they can't get ahead.
The Jews, you
So,
mean? You mean
the
the
Jews,
Jews?
yeah, the
Right.
Jews. A lot of stuff about the Jews in there. It's amazing how often the Jews come up, and I do not just say this because I am Jewish and perhaps somewhat attuned to it, but really, Kelly Wheel at the Daily Beast writes a lot about flat eartherism, and she noted something to me recently that I had also been seeing, which is that even flat earth communities eventually turn into like Holocaust denial. Like there are so many conspiracy communities where the terminal stop on the train is some form of anti-Semitism in ways that is really surprising.
At one point, we have to wonder, like, is that a coincidence or is there something to that?
I think that, right, that's a good joke. I acknowledge
Right.
your joke. I
Right.
think that
Thank
in
you.
reality, yeah, you're welcome. I think that in reality, it is very useful to have a group of evil outsiders who we blame for a myriad of world events. And when all else fails, we have the Jews for that.
Right.
Like it is one of the oldest and deepest sort of conspiratorial ideas. So it just fundamentally, it's still around because it's useful.
I mean, Jews end up being like the Deus ex machina of all
Yeah,
of these
exactly.
things. When you've run out of being able to make any type of logical steps, the Jews step in to basically short circuit the thing.
We do that. I mean, I always tell these guys that, and they're always guys that I end up talking to who are white supremacists, you think about the Jews way more than I do. Like this is something that occupies you far more than it occupies me, but that's because, it has a purpose for them.